Sites can come in all different shapes and sizes. Some sites are dedicated research centers, so everything is very simple when it comes to those sites. It just exists, and the facilities are used strictly for research and nothing else. Other times you're dealing with hospitals where research is just a very small part of the entire hospital, and so you're going to have to focus on the research specifically, and sometimes they're combined. So they have a big department for research, but it's still within a hospital or a large medical group practice. You need to understand what type of site you're dealing with here. You want to know the days and hours of operation and emergency after hours procedure. So for example, what number do patients call? That's a 24-hour emergency line. And you want to document this number. And this number will actually be put into the informed consent form. And so I've had some monitors actually call these numbers that sites are putting as their emergency number to confirm if it's a real number that somebody's answering. And so maybe you want to do that too, but at least you want to document that they do have some kind of procedures for emergency or after hours in case a patient has a problem with the study. You want to take notes on the waiting room. What does the waiting room look like? Where are the research patients separated from the non-research patients? You want to look at these things. You want to look at the number of exam rooms and make sure you describe them in detail in the report. Did they look busy? Do they look like there's enough space to conduct your research study? And you as a CRA should know a lot of detail about your research study, specifically some of the nuances about it. So you want to be able to know whether for example, if the site only has 2 exam rooms, and when you went to the site selection visit, they were constantly treating patients in the exam rooms. That's a good thing, but also could be potentially a bad thing if your study has very long visits for patients, or if your study requires frequent PK draws or frequent blood draws where you're going to need access to that exam room numerous times during the visit. And so you'll understand the details of your protocol, and you should look when you're doing the site selection visit to see from a logistical perspective, is this something that can be done at this site? And be able to describe the laboratory area just like you are able to describe the exam room area in great detail and put it in the report. The more detail, the better in these reports. Also, we discussed earlier the equipment. So the centrifuge, the EKG, the height and weight scale, the blood pressure cuffs, the -20 or -70 freezer, access to dry ice. How often are they calibrated? Do we have calibration logs? Who's calibrating it? What's the vendor? Also, the temperature logs as well. And that's going to be for the IP, which is the next slide. What is the plan for receipt, storage, dispensing, and return or destruction of study drugs? Must be double locked and limited access. All these things you need to describe in detail. As you can see, this report is going to be very lengthy. And obviously, the larger the site is, the more detail you're going to have to write in your report. Some sites, their SOP says they destroy the study drug. Other sites say they return it to sponsor. So you need to document this. Also, look at the space for the IP. Ask the site, if you're not there physically, if it's virtual, ask them to show you the IP room. Who has access? Is it double locked? Is it temperature controlled? Is it restricted access? Document, document, document. Review the space for non-IP study supplies, for example, lab kits, regulatory binders, also known as investigator site files. Look at this space. Is there enough space to keep lab kits? You know, if you've been doing research, that space is a premium in many sites, and studies send lots of lab kits and lots of study supplies. So make sure, if you're looking at a small clinic, make sure they understand that there's going to be a lot of kits sent to them, a lot of boxes, a lot of supplies. It just takes up a lot of room. And then ask the site to show you the monitoring area. Make sure it's a room, like a private room. It could be a shared. I've seen some monitoring spaces with cubicles where other monitors are next to you. That's obviously a little bit less desirable. But most sites typically have private monitoring rooms. It could be an exam room. It should not be a bathroom. I've heard, believe it or not, it's funny stories, but I have heard of sites that are so much lacking space that they actually asked their CRA to monitor in a bathroom or in a waiting room, which is, so you want to find out if that's the case, because obviously that wouldn't be the most efficient way to monitor a study. And so space is something that should be considered, and is often not considered enough, in my opinion, in research. So this is just a little bit of a humorous example, but it's actually true. I've heard of a monitor being asked to monitor in a bathroom, and yeah, I mean, just document that there's enough space and that the site confirms that there is adequate space for monitors. And again, detail. Okay, you have to put a lot of detail in these reports. And then you, as a CRA, believe it or not, in most reports, you make a recommendation. Not all sponsors have the CRA make the recommendation, but most of them do. So in the site selection visit report, usually the CRA, the CRA, are asked for your opinion on whether the site is a good choice for the study or not. Keep in mind, this will be held against you. If you say yes to a site and they end up not being very good site, that's not going to make you look necessarily good either. So I would say this is why it's important to have as detailed a site selection visit report as possible, so that you, should things go wrong, you at least have the documentation to show, even if the sponsor selects the site, and even if you recommended them, but with your concerns, as long as your concerns are documented, ultimately it's the sponsor's decision on whether they're going to select the site or not. But the CRA, the sponsor is relying on your report. You are the eyes and ears and the mouth for the sponsor when you're doing all visits, but especially when you're doing site selection visit.